How many of you voted in the last election, presidential election? You still do? All of you? No? Do you regret your decision not to? Okay. I still remember the first time I voted in my first election and how proud I was that I was making a difference in the country. I also felt that it was my civic responsibility to do so, and the pride and the patriotism to do so was beaming out, felt like it was beaming out of me during my first election. So I want to talk to you guys a little about today about how important it is that we allow all American citizens, U.S. citizens, the right to vote, and this includes felons. This is just a couple of disenfranchised laws that are around the country that we have here. So if you look at the slide here, you'll see that there's about 48 states, including the District of Columbia, that has voting disenfranchisement laws. And most ex-felons in 38 states, including the District of Columbia, have voting rights restored when they complete their sentences, according to the National Conference and State of Legislature. About 1 in 40 adults, or more than 5 million Americans, have lost their voting rights. That's a lot. And in Kentucky, if you think about this, this started a long time ago. You got Kentucky, who became the first state to enact criminal disenfranchisement back in 1792. So, a lot of these felons don't even know they have their rights restored. They don't know. They figure I'm a felon. That's it. I could never vote in another election at all. So it's important for us to remind people and activate to let those people know, these felons know, that depending on what state they're in, that you do have the right to vote. And this is important because it creates a new voice. It increases voter turnout, and it's going to definitely change the political landscape. So this was my first election. Oh God, 1992, right? Again, when I first walked out of the voting booth, I was walking outside. My mother was out there waiting for me. She said I would just, this big cheesy smile. I felt proud. I was a proud American that day, and it was important for me to share that experience and encourage my children and my wife especially to vote in definitely every presidential election, gubernatorial election, but it's important also to vote for every local election as well. And so I'm pretty prideful that my kids, they take, even when they're outside at college in a different state, they did their absentee ballots. So who believes in second chances here, right? Do you give a person a second chance depending on the severity of their crime, the action or behavior? Do you give them a second chance based on what they did, or do we just give people a second chance? All right. So, think about if we allow felons to vote. What kind of impact would that have? What would this do to the political landscape in our country? Would our elections look a lot different? That's important. So I want to bring your attention to this slide here, because recently in 2018, Florida voted, the residents voted on the Florida Amendment 4, Voting Rights Restoration Amendment. And what's important about that, it restored felons' right to vote. This is a graph here. It's pretty amazing if you look at it from 2011 to 2017 in Florida. These are all felons who applied for restoration for their voting rights. And you see the small number of percentages that were granted. Arguments for if you look at the arguments for this, we have, according to Reggie Garcia, who's a lawyer, and author of Second Chance Florida, part of the Restoration Civil Act, he says that the data from the Florida Commission of Offender Review proves that a vast majority of felons who get their voting and other civil rights back do not commit new crimes. They have learned from their mistakes, and they're trying to earn a second chance they have been given. And we'll have some opposition here. And basically what this person went on to say is that other than murder and sexual felonies, we're going to treat everybody the same. There's no differentiating in each felon and what they did. States that allow voting rights for felons, there's a couple there: California, Texas, Illinois. We still have states like Iowa, Kentucky, Virginia, that felons will never regain their voting rights again. And here's just a map of how the United States look. If you see everything in dark green, that's where they don't have voting rights. But Florida just recently changed, and that law went into effect March 1st. And this is why it's important that we allow felons to vote. Because if you look at Florida alone, which is historically a Republican state, look at the percentages that Donald Trump won by. He won by 1.2%, which is roughly 112,000 votes. Florida, with this new law, is going to have about 1.6% felons that are going to be eligible to vote again. We could have won. Democrats could have won the U.S. presidency if this has happened. All right. So, voting is the foundation stone for political action. Martin Luther King. The decision was made by the voters, but the GOP is still trying to find other ways to not allow these Florida people to vote. They want to implement like judicial fees. If you owe back money, you have to pay that off before you're eligible to vote. This is just something that people think we're just minorities such as African Americans, Mexican Americans are discriminated against to vote at the polls, but this is something that I came across when it came to Asian Americans. So that if they couldn't speak good English, they possibly weren't American citizens. So I know a lot of our Spanish-speaking residents and citizens go through that. So a couple of recent changes. California, they allow people who are in jail to still vote during the election time. So, and then Louisiana just recently enacted felons voter laws as well, restored. So, will the GOP get their way? Why are Republicans doing this? They seem to fear the electoral effects of restoring votes to rights to disproportionately African American groups. In a closely divided swing state, keeping even a smaller number of voters off the rolls could prove decisive.